Welcome back, Lee.
So many faces I recognize. Yeah, it's great to be back. Leslie and I drove in the front entrance yesterday, and the building's impressive, but what we saw was the pond where I was baptized, and Leslie was baptized, and my children were baptized, and it's a very special place for us. Willow Creek God does amazing things at this church.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. We love you and what God is doing through you. I want to go back to your days as the legal editor at the Chicago Tribune. And tell us about your role and what you did.
Well, as legal editor, I would cover major trials around the country, crime syndicate, political corruption cases, things like that, do investigations related to those things, cover Supreme Court decisions, the Bar Association, the legal profession. So anything that law touched, which these days is about everything, unfortunately, it was kind of in my bailiwick.
Now, when you were kind of approaching a case, to be a great legal editor, what did you have to do to write the kind of articles that, would actually uncover the right kind of evidence?
Well, you had to understand something about the law. You had to understand what evidence is, what proof is. You had to love words. You had to love bringing people with you on a journey to discover, what the news was telling us and why it's important and what it means to our lives and so forth. So it was really exciting. You felt like you were on a seat on the front row of history. It was exhilarating.
Yeah. Now, your career at the Tribune was just growing. You were rising in influence, but your personal life. Talk about Lee Strobel kind of at home. Who were you really?
Yeah, I think what people saw was me winning awards for investigative reporting, but they didn't see the other side, which was me literally drunk in the snow in an alley on Saturday night. I was an atheist, I was a narcissist, I was a hedonist, I was self-absorbed, I'll tell you the ugliest truth about me, which is when my daughter was a toddler, if she was alone in the living room playing with some toys or whatever, and she would hear me come home from work through the front door, her natural reaction was just to gather her toys and go in her room and shut the door. Is she going to be drunk again? Is she going to be, yelling and screaming and literally, like I did once, kicking holes in the walls out of rage? At least it's nice and quiet in here. So, it had an effect on my family.
I got to see the new movie, The Case for Christ, and I've always known you as the nicest person, and then I'm watching the depiction of you as what you were describing, and I was like, that can't be real.
Yeah, Stephen Young, who's on staff here, saw a preview of the movie and came up to me afterwards and said, "I didn't know you were such a jerk." Thank you. But we wanted to make an honest movie. We wanted not to varnish it and not to pretend it was something that it wasn't. So it's a little embarrassing to have this shown to the world. And for Leslie, it's emotional because there's a lot of private arguments that we had that were just between us, but now they're on the screen for people to see. And she told me they gave us a link so we could watch the movie on our computer. And she said, "I've seen it 10 times. And I said, "Why do you keep watching it?" And she said, "'Cause I want to get cried out so that when I see it in public, I don't cry and embarrass myself." So it's emotional for us to see our life live. This is our life.
Yeah. And the movie comes out this Friday.
This Friday, right.
Nationwide.
Right.
Oh, it's so exciting. Now, we've got a trailer for it. I'd love for you to see it. Watch this.
If somebody wanted to do an investigation into Christianity, where would you start?
If the resurrection of Jesus didn't happen, it's a house of cards.
You sure you want to give me that loaded gun?
I'm pretty sure you're not going to be able to pull the trigger.
I've spent my entire career as a journalist, uncovering the truth. Until the day my wife presented me with the biggest story of my life.
I'm not gonna lose my wife and my kids to something that I can't even reason with.
And what happened next changed me forever.
How can we even talk about historical evidence for the resurrection?
The Gospels are filled with contradictions.
The empty tomb is based on evidence. And isn't evidence your trade?
We all bet our lives on something.
The question is, what's it going to be?
As much as I would like to help out a fellow skeptic, what you're proposing is impossible.
Could Jesus survive being spiked to the cross?
There is no evidence of anyone ever surviving a full Roman crucifixion.
Just because I write something down and I bury it in the dirt, that doesn't make it true.
What I felt was something more real than anything I've ever felt in my life.
I'm praying for you.
Do you really want to know the truth, or is your mind already made up?
Stop blaming me and the church and God and do your job.
No one's ever proven if the shroud is the actual burial cloth of the Christ. But whenever someone looks in those eyes for the first time, suddenly becomes a real person.
You know, getting the chance to see it a couple weeks ago, I mean, I literally got done watching it, fired off a couple emails and to people who were connected to it, you and Mark and others, and was just really, really impressed. And I'm so excited for as many people as possible to watch this because it really shows kind of that unique transformation story of who you once were and an honest pursuit. But as you were rising in influence in the Chicago Tribune, your wife starts to come to Willow, and something begins to happen.
Yeah, there was a woman in real life, her name was Linda, and in the film her name was Alfie.
Yeah.
And she invited Leslie to come to Willow Creek. And Leslie came and heard the gospel, investigated it in her own way, checked it out over a period of time. And then she came up to me and said, Lee, I made a big decision. I've decided to become a follower of Jesus, which I thought was the worst possible news as an atheist. I thought, you know, she's going to get pulled into this cult. Yeah. She's going to get pulled into this Christian subculture where I wasn't welcome as an atheist. We were going to have conflict over how to raise our kids, how to spend our money, how to spend our weekends. I felt increasingly jealous of Jesus, because now there's another man in our marriage. Who invited him in, you know? You know, she's getting emotional support from this guy. I thought that was my role. And so it caused a very tumultuous era of
What
our
did you
marriage.
think when she...
Divorce. First word that went through my mind was divorce.
Divorce. It's one of the most powerful scenes in the movie. And, you know, you were given rights to show it. But just that conversation in the kitchen where she says, I went to church. Watch this.
The TV's all staticky again. Tried banging on it. That's not working anymore.
Did you check the roof?
Yeah, the antenna's fine. Maybe you should call the repair guy, see if he can come by and take a peek at it.
Sure. Hey, so I went to see Alfie last week. Alfie, Superwoman who saved our daughter.
Right.
Alfie. So she invited me to her church, and I went.
Really? Oh, I would have loved to have seen that.
Yeah, well, I wanted to go.
Can't we just give it a break, Les? Okay, I know you were rattled the other night.
Are you interested in hearing me or just condescending?
No, that's not what I'm trying to do here. Okay, but Allison's fine, hon. Let's not go crazy.
I'm not acting crazy. Am I acting crazy?
It was a wrong choice of words. I don't think you're crazy. I think you're pregnant. And a little crazy. And scared, and I get it.
Do you? Because I'm not done yet.
Okay.
So I went to church. And I don't know exactly how it happened, but I felt something. And so I went again tonight. And I know this is going to be weird to hear because it's weird to say, but I prayed.
So what are you telling me, Les?
I'm saying that I talked to Jesus. I told him I want him in my life.
You what? Why? Why would you?
Hey, stay with me, hon. This is a good thing.
What did this Alfie woman say to you?
It was my decision. Okay?
I don't accept it.
You don't get to accept it. I'm not asking. I'm telling you what happened and you're not hearing me. Okay. Listen, hon, it's me. This is me talking to you. It's me. Honestly, this is something that I think I've been thinking for a long time, and I just haven't been able to say anything because of who you are.
Oh, are you kidding me, Les?
I know this is a lot.
A lot?
hon.
A lot? You dropped this on me. What does that even mean?
Well, I don't know what it means, but I know it's a good thing for me, for us.
No,
Yes,
okay,
yes.
this is not us, Leslie. Whatever this is, okay, it is not us.
Can
you are
you
on
listen
your
to me
own.
and not get
I am
mad?
listening to you, and that's the problem. So if you're serious about
And I
this,
am.
Okay, well then I don't know what to say to you
Don't
about
say
whatever
anything,
this
then
is.
just listen to what I'm trying to say because I'm trying to explain that I felt something that is maybe more real than anything I've ever felt in my life.
More real than anything you felt in your life.
Okay, I'm not
Got
trying
it.
to compare.
Got it. No, you know what? I don't want to hear any
Come
more
on.
of this. Okay?
Hun, where are you going?
File a missing persons report.
That's not funny.
Not meant to be.
I think Leslie's faithfulness, you see this in the film.
Yeah.
And kind of walking this tightrope, giving you the space to be frustrated, to be unsure, and then to go on this investigation. How did she make it through this?
Well, Alfie, or Linda, was her mentor, and she would bring her to Willow Creek, and Leslie began to grow in her faith. But Leslie one day came to Willow Creek, and there were some women there that she was getting to know. And she told him, she said, I don't have any hope for my husband. He is the hard-headed, hard-hearted legal editor of the Chicago Tribune. He is never going to bend his knee to Jesus. And this one woman, who might be here today, I don't know, Sylvia Sherry, put her arm around Leslie and kind of pulled her to the side and said, oh, Leslie, no one is beyond hope. And she gave her a verse from the Old Testament, Ezekiel 36:26, that says, moreover, I will give you a new heart, and I will put a new spirit within you. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. And so what I never knew on this investigation that I did to disprove Christianity so I could get her out of this cult, every day behind the scenes, early in the morning before I would get up, Leslie would be on her knees praying that verse for me. And she prayed that the whole 2 years. And I think, if you ask me what brought me to faith, was it the spiritual investigation or was it the prayers of a faithful wife? I kind of vote for Leslie.
So you go on this 2-year investigation to disprove Christianity.
Right. It seemed, I thought it was going to take a weekend. I thought surely something as crazy as someone coming back from the dead, I can certainly disprove that in maybe a 3-day weekend, but a weekend, right? Well, it took 2 years. Using my legal background, journalism background to investigate the historical evidence for the resurrection. And I'll tell you what I found. First of all, the death of Jesus. Was he dead? Well, much of what we know from ancient history, we know from 1 or 2 sources. But for the death of Jesus, we not only have multiple early first century accounts in the documents of the New Testament, we've got 5 ancient sources outside the Bible confirming and corroborating his death. I mean, the evidence is so historically strong that you could go to one of the few atheist New Testament scholars, like Gerhard Ludemann, and he will tell you that Jesus' death as a consequence of crucifixion is historically indisputable. Indisputable. In fact, the Journal of the American Medical Association, a peer-reviewed scientific journal, studied the historical and medical evidence for the death of Jesus and concluded he was clearly dead even before the wound to his side was inflicted. So Jesus was dead. But then I thought the resurrection was a legend. And I knew it took time for legend to develop in the ancient world. A.N. Sherwin White, the great classical historian, said the passage of 2 generations of time was not even enough for legend to grow up and wipe out a solid core of historical truth. So I thought over a period of time, 100, 150 years, legends developed, stories were invented, and that's where the idea of the resurrection came from. But then I discovered we have preserved for us a creed, a statement of conviction of the earliest Christians. They used to rally around this creed in the first century based on facts that they knew to be true. The creed says Jesus died, why? For our sins. He was buried. On the 3rd day, he rose from the dead. And then it mentions the specific names of eyewitnesses and groups of eyewitnesses to whom he appeared, including skeptics. Now, this creed has been dated back by scholars to within months of the death of Jesus. Within months. This is a news flash from ancient history. I mean, this is historical gold. And it just, to me, it just dispels the idea that this is a legend. But then you have more. You have the empty tomb, that even the opponents of Jesus implicitly admitted that the tomb was empty. And then there are 9 ancient sources inside and outside the New Testament confirming and corroborating the conviction of the disciples that they encountered the resurrected Jesus. That is an avalanche of historical data. And we have 7 other sources, 6 of them outside the Bible, confirming that the disciples lived lives of deprivation and suffering as a result of their proclamation that Jesus had risen. Why were they willing to do that? Because a Sunday school teacher told them that Jesus rose? No, because they were there. They touched him, they talked with them, they ate with them. Of all human beings who've ever lived in history, the disciples were in a unique position to know, is this true or is it a lie? And knowing it was true, they were even willing to die for it. So that is I tell you in a court of law, when people have nothing to lose, or nothing to gain and everything to lose by their testimony, they're probably telling you the truth, right? So, I looked at this stuff for 2 years, and it finally came down to a Sunday afternoon. I'd gone to Willow Creek that morning with Leslie, and I went home, and I thought, a good jury reaches a verdict. The evidence was in after 2 years. And so I kind of reviewed it all and kind of laid it out and studied it once more, and then I stepped back and I said, wait a minute. In light of the avalanche of evidence that points so powerfully toward the truth of Christianity, I realized it would take more faith to maintain my atheism than to become a Christian. The scales just sort of tipped. So that was when I reached my verdict.
So you get these 2 years of study and you go through each one of those 4 points.
Yeah.
But was there like a moment where kind of, I gotta make a verdict, I gotta declare?
It was kind of a 2-phase. One was the conclusion that based on the data, I was convinced that Jesus not only claimed to be the Son of God, he backed it up by returning from the dead. So I found myself convinced by the evidence. But then I realized that's not enough, because I read John 1:12. It says, but as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, even to those who believe in his name. So I looked at that and I thought, wait a minute. If you take out the key words of that verse, it forms an equation of what it means to become a child of God. Believe plus receive equals become. So I believed based on the data that Jesus is who he claimed to be, but I had to receive. Receive what? Receive this free gift of forgiveness and eternal life that Jesus purchased for me on the cross when he died as my substitute to pay for all of my sin. And when I would receive this free gift of his grace, then I would become a child of God. So that's when I got on my knees and confessed a lifetime of immorality and received at that moment complete and total forgiveness through Jesus Christ. And I became a child of God.
What's really beautiful in the movie is how Willow Creek, is really like a character in the movie.
Right.
Bill's even in the movie.
Right.
You got
the Bill of 1980.
Yeah, Hollywood Bill, as I like to call him. Look at that.
Yeah.
Right there,
doesn't it?
Yeah.
Huh?
Let's get him in the baptism waters.
Yeah, there you go.
That.
Pretty close. That's Erica Christensen from Parenthood who plays Leslie.
She was great.
Yeah.
You know what's awesome about this church for me is people from all walks of life could come. And you came.
Yeah, I met an atheist last hour. We had a nice little talk. Yeah.
You know, and that people can sit, they can receive, they can listen, they can go on this journey in their own pace.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who hasn't yet believed, hasn't yet received, but they're here, just maybe got dragged here?
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
Right. I know what it feels like to get dragged. But, you know, what I'd say, do what I did when I started my investigation. I was an atheist. I did not believe in God, but I prayed. At that moment, I prayed a 15-second prayer, and the prayer was, God, I do not believe you're there. In fact, I am convinced that you do not exist. But if you are real, I want to meet you. Now, I figured as an atheist, if there's no God, and I was convinced there wasn't, I've only lost 15 seconds of my life. But if there is, the upside's pretty good, you know. So, I mean, to pray that kind, I call it the skeptic's prayer. To pray a skeptic's prayer like that. And you know, I prayed that with an atheist last hour. And who knows what. But, you know, the Old Testament and the New Testament both say, if you sincerely seek God, you're going to find him. And one of the great things about the Christian faith is, unlike virtually every other world religion, it is an investigatable faith. In fact, Paul says, if Christ has not been raised, your faith is futile. You're still in your sins. So in other words, you know, these are historical issues. Did Jesus live? Did he die? Was he reliably encountered afterwards? Those are historical questions that we can investigate, just as we can investigate Alexander the Great or some other figure or events from ancient history.
And for anyone who's on that journey, I mean, I cannot recommend the Case for Christ enough. I think it's one of those honest searches with incredible evidence, and it's always nice when someone else has done the work, and you know, and then you can
and we just updated it with new archaeological evidence that's come out in recent years, fascinating new discoveries, a new chapter and things. But thanks for saying that. You know, that grew out of a sermon series I did here at the church, and afterwards Leslie said, you ought to write a book. I said, no. And then, well, maybe, okay. But, you know, it all started when I did a series called The Case for Christ here years ago. But that's why I say why this is such a special place, because it is a place that welcomes people from all backgrounds. And God does something. Lives are transformed in this place and through this place because people meet God. And, you know, I think of the millions of ways in which he's changed my life, my values, my character, my morality, my philosophy, my priorities, my attitudes, my parenting, my marriage. I mean, in fact, I did this last night in the last hour, and it's kind of a risk, but I thought it's worth taking. How many of you can say that Willow Creek played an important role in you meeting Jesus Christ? How many? Raise your hand. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, look at the hands. I mean, that just warms my heart. Because that's my life mission, is to help people meet Jesus. And, you know, this film, you know, some people won't come into a church. Some people won't read a 300-page book. But they'll go to a movie, especially if you buy the ticket and the popcorn, right? And so that's our hope, that people will go because it is an entertaining movie. They did a terrific job making the movie. But the gospel is woven into it, and the evidence is woven into it.
Now, Lee, I want to take this question from Reem. He tweets in, he says, best way to consistently make the case of Christ to our kids clear?
Well, it's so important. Golly, how many times do I meet people, parents, grandparents, who say, golly, my child grew up in the church, and he went to youth group, and then he went away to college, and then now he says he's a skeptic, he's an atheist. And I say, first of all, don't panic. Don't panic. You know, it's fashionable to be an atheist these days. When I was an atheist, nobody wanted to admit it. I didn't want to say it. Now it's a little more fashionable to be that. And so I say continue to pray with them and for them, but help them understand at a young age. I think we can inoculate ourselves against a lot of this by exposing them to the array of evidence that points so powerfully and persuasively toward the truth of the faith. You know, I didn't just look at the resurrection. I looked at science, and does that point away from God or toward God? And looking at cosmology and physics and biochemistry and genetics and human consciousness, I think there's a powerful case that the evidence, especially over the last 50 years in science, points increasingly toward a creator who happens to look a lot like the God of the Bible. And we have to help our kids understand that, and to help understand that history points in the direction of Jesus, not only claiming to be the Son of God, but backing up that claim by returning from the dead. So I was encouraged. Recently, there was a headline in Christianity Today that said, apologetics, which is the study of the evidence, apologetics is making a comeback in student ministries. And the point of the article was, our young people are not interested in spiritual soft serve. Yeah. They're interested in substance. Yep. They don't want to base their life on shifting sands of moral relativism and on mythology and make-believe and wishful thinking. We want to know. It's interesting. The Bible says our hope is anchored in the resurrection. So how do we know it's true? Yep. And so I'm passionate about helping young people understand why it is we believe what we believe, to strengthen their own faith, but also to prepare them to engage with a culture that's increasingly skeptical and increasingly, in some cases, hostile toward the Christian message, to be salt and light for this next generation. And I'm optimistic. When I see young people at this church and the church where I'm a pastor at down in Texas, worshiping God, enthused about their faith, their lives transformed, God giving them purpose and meaning and a mission in life that really matters, I just get fired up by that.
Lee, that's powerful. Hey, just as a younger pastor, there's a number of us on staff. Thank you. Thank you for what you, Mark, Gary, a number of incredible just people who have come before us, who have committed their lives to making good news their life's work. And you've done that with such power, with such grace.
It's an adventure. It's an adventure. I remember when Willow Creek offered me a position to leave my journalism career, and I wanted to stay in journalism. I believe it's important for Christians to be in that profession. But I felt called by God to not just into ministry, but into this church. I felt such a calling. And when they offered me the position, the salary was 60% less than what I was getting at the Tribune, which wasn't much. And I said, absolutely, and let's do it. And later, one of the pastors said to me, gosh, you kind of jumped at that pretty quick. It's only 40% of what you make. And I said, I would have done it for nothing. I would have done it for nothing because, I pictured the end of my life, putting my head on the pillow for the last time before I died, and looking back and thinking, I felt God calling me into an adventure, and I said no. How would I feel at that moment? I couldn't do that. I had to say yes. And yeah, it seemed risky, but oh my gosh, I think what would I have missed? I would have missed this. I would have missed those hands. I would have missed the presence of God in ways that meets people where they're at. God met Anne Lamott in a different way than he met me. But God knew. He'd wired me up, in law and evidence and journalism and so forth, to look at the facts and so forth. He wired Ann up in a completely different way, but he met us both right where we were at. And every person here, God will meet you exactly where you are, and it will change your life.
Well, the movie comes out April 7th. I hope that you will go check it out. Bring a friend. And Lee Strobel, thank you for who you are. Willow, can we thank Lee?
Thanks, man.
I hope this is a great